Hi, I'm Brother Jake. Now, it seems like there are a lot of people out there that think that the Mormon idea of church discipline is weird and or an archaic method of punitive humiliation, but that's not true at all. Let me explain. But first, let's talk about what exactly church discipline is. See, according to the Church Handbook of Instructions, which is like this super sweet owner's manual for people running local congregations like wards and stakes, church discipline is when an ecclesiastical priesthood leader puts restrictions on somebody's membership so that the person can officially repent when they've done something bad. Church discipline can either be informal or formal. Informal church discipline usually happens with lower level sins like robbing God a little bit by not paying all the tithing you're supposed to, or drinking booze or coffee, or if you have a friend who practices self-abuse, and then a local congregational leader like a bishop can tell your friend that he can't take the sacrament or something, but it's going to be okay and someday you'll be fine. That's what I've heard. Anyway, if the sins get serious enough, you gotta go to formal church discipline. But it's not about punishing people, it's about love. It's even called a court of love. So, it's just trying to get people to repent so they can go back with God in super special VIP heaven. Anyway, for someone to get formal church discipline, you need a disciplinary council, which is this panel of 15 dudes. The 3 members of the stake presidency and the 12 members of the high council, who make up the group that oversees the stake, which consists of a bunch of local congregations called wards. When a disciplinary council happens, all the dudes from the stake high council and the transgressors show up. Then half the high council guys are randomly assigned to advocate on the transgressor's side, just to make sure that they get a fair shake in the whole process. Kind of like if you got assigned a defense attorney, but from the prosecutor's office. Oh, I almost forgot. Okay, let's back up. See, when I was talking about a disciplinary council, I should have mentioned that there are actually 2 types of disciplinary councils. The one I just described, with the one of the people assigned to argue your side, that's called a stake disciplinary council, and it only applies when the church discipline involves somebody who holds the Melchizedek priesthood, which means if you're a male under the age of 18, or say a woman of any age, you actually only have to go through a ward disciplinary council, which is just a bishop and his 2 counselors without anyone actually assigned to plead your case at all. But if you're thinking, hey, that's sexist, just remember that since women don't have the super awesome authority of God because they don't have the priesthood, they don't have as far to fall, spiritually speaking, so it's not as serious since there isn't as much on the line. Now, if you're thinking, whoa, that's really sexist, just remember that I already explained how Mormons aren't sexist in my other videos, so, issue resolved. Anyway, in a disciplinary council, the guys hear out all the evidence and make a decision, which can be different levels of, let's call it lovingness. So at the first level, you have formal probation, which is a lot like informal discipline, where there are some things you can't do, like take the sacrament, but all your super awesome blessings still count, like a legit baptism and temple marriage. It's kind of like a misdemeanor. The next level of discipline is disfellowshipment, which is pretty seriously loving. You're still technically a member, but you're no longer in good standing, which means that you're not allowed to have a recommend to go into our super special VIP temples, or take the sacrament, or exercise the power of the priesthood by doing stuff like giving blessings, or legit baptisms, or pray in church, or even participate in the totally meaningful and democratic sustaining of church leaders. But you can still pay tithing, so it means it isn't all bad. It's just kind of like a felony or something. And finally, there's the most loving of all, excommunication. When you're excommunicated, you're officially no longer considered to be a member at all, so all your special blessings, like having a legit baptism or being sealed to your family so you can live together after you die, don't officially count anymore, so you can't ever get into super VIP heaven. And since being separated from the presence of God is defined as spiritual death within Mormon doctrine, excommunication is pretty much like, Now, at this point, you might be saying it's really unfair that such a small group of men can have so much influence over members' eternal salvation, especially considering how much variation there is between lay leaders of different wards and stakes, to the point that member behavior in one area may be totally fine while the same behavior in another area is considered grounds for excommunication. But you need to remember that priesthood leaders get super sweet priesthood keys that allow them to receive revelation for their congregation, so whatever standards they decide to enforce is totally sanctioned and approved of by God. See, isn't the priesthood great? Now, all this might make you wonder what exactly qualifies you for a disciplinary council, seeing that people's eternal salvation hangs in the balance, which is a good question. The sins more or less line up with the big sins listed in the Book of Mormon. So, sexual sins like adultery or incest or forcible rape, then murder, which is pretty self-explanatory, and then the really bad one, apostasy, which is when you preach stuff that is against church doctrine or join another church or oppose church leaders. So if someone were to, publicly petition the church to revisit the idea that women aren't allowed to hold priesthood offices and therefore are systematically barred from positions of significant influence over church policy, that would count as apostasy, since that would be totally against church doctrine, right?
The question is, where does it say in Mormon doctrine that women cannot hold the priesthood? There was an interchange.
It doesn't.
Okay.
Oh, right. Well, sure, maybe there are some doctrines that aren't written down or explicitly stated anywhere. And sure, maybe the fact that Mormons claim to have a living prophet and an open canon make it hard to pin down exactly what Mormon doctrine is, especially when there are pretty recent examples of things claimed to be doctrine that just so happened to totally change when public opinion started to shift away from those doctrines. And yeah, that might make the idea of targeting people who express public opinions that differ from the church's mainstream mentality for disciplinary councils for apostasy seem like a 17th century witch hunt over thought crimes. But it's not about people having different opinions. We love diversity.
It's one thing to make one's views known. It's quite another to actively draw others away from clear doctrine.
Exactly. We're not against people who have doubts, just as long as you express those doubts respectfully in a non-public way that doesn't allow like-minded people to, find you and join with you. So we're not against free thought, just, free speech. But you know what? I think we're losing the real focus here.
It's meant to be a loving invitation, and it's something that is done by that local leader in complete love.
Exactly. It's about love. Like when Jesus talked about the 99 sheep. It's about going after the one sheep that's lost. And yeah, having a formal disciplinary process in place that could result in someone being officially kicked out of the church either temporarily or permanently, and therefore ineligible to live in super awesome VIP heaven after they die, may seem like a strange way to bring about that one sheep back into the fold. But if that lost sheep is really just sitting out there acting like it's totally not lost when it really is, sometimes you have to tell the sheep how far away it actually is so that it can eventually come back for realsies. Otherwise, it'll just think it's fine and then get totally rejected at the final judgment. Plus, if that one sheep is really just kind of a bad sheep, don't you kind of want it far away from the other sheep so it doesn't, contaminate them? I mean, don't get me wrong, church discipline is still all about helping that one sheep, but it's their choice to wander off. And sure, it might seem a little contradictory to say that it's all their fault when the definitions of words like doctrine and public and oppose and apostasy aren't very well defined, especially considering the fact that the only publication that outlines the criteria for and process of church discipline is only given to a select few priesthood holders in every congregation, who are then explicitly instructed not to show it to anybody else. But we didn't make the rules, God did, and He revealed them to us through His prophets and apostles, who are always right. Except when they're not. So you see, it's all about love.